Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. In this video, we'll be going from seed to harvest with my attempt to grow sweet corn using Kratky hydroponics. As per usual, I'm using Grodan or rockwool cubes as the growing medium to start my seeds. To do that, I'm going to make sure that these pre-drilled holes in my rockwool cube have lots of room inside for my seeds. And then I'm going to soak these rockwool cubes and let out all of the bubbles. I'm going to put my seeds into those holes, tapping them down inside lightly, and then we're going to ensure that these are in a container with a lid to keep that moisture inside and put these seeds somewhere that is dark. On day 2 of germination, I did see small signs of rooting. However, as you can see, this root was coming up through the top of my Grodan cube, which is not ideal. I opted to break this cube open to try and remove that seed and realign it so the roots were pointing downwards. I checked in on my second seed as well, and it appeared to be growing right side up. By day 3, I had stems emerging from the tops of my Grodan cubes, and even small roots beginning to come out of the bottom. I moved these young plants into net cups where they would have access to a reservoir full of water, and those roots could really start to emerge. By the end of week 1, these seeds have officially become small plants. You can see these leaves beginning to open up on each of these plants, as well as new growth continuing from the center of each stem. At this point, I'm going to move these plants into non-transparent containers and get them access to some nutrients. Nearing the end of week 2, you can see that these plants have grown considerably and they're struggling to keep themselves upright. We've got a number of leaves branching off of that stem, and we've got good solid root growth coming from these plants. I was able to use pipe cleaners to bend and create a support mechanism to help keep this corn upright. I also added clay pebbles to my net cup for a little extra support. We rejoined these plants on day 18 and they're looking pretty good, growing quite fast. You can see these leaves are really starting to reach out. The plant does, however, look a little bit yellow, maybe not as green as it could be. Not sure what might be causing that. Our root systems have developed nicely and are getting to be about as large as the reservoir we have these plants in. So I'm going to take this opportunity and move them into a 5-gallon bucket, which will be their final home. Here we see these plants about midway through week 5 since germinating those seeds. They've grown considerably. You can see that one plant is much larger than the other at this point. I actually opted to throw away the small plant and just stick with the large one. I'm still a bit worried about the overall health of this plant. It does look quite yellow. You can see these lines of green beginning to spread themselves throughout each leaf. However, as a whole, the plant just doesn't look that green. It's been really tough to find nutritional deficiency information regarding this plant and growing it with hydroponics, but the plant does continue to grow each day, so we're going to stick it out and see what kind of harvest we can get from this plant. By week 6, we had a tassel beginning to emerge from the top of this plant. The tassel is where we will find all of the pollen that we need to pollinate our ears of corn. At this point, this plant and its leaves are very big and it's difficult to get good coverage with my grow lights. The vertical growth of this plant causes those lower leaves to be very far down from my light source, and they're likely not getting enough light each day. This could be contributing to my yellowing issue and maybe slowing the growth of the plant. In week 7, our tassel was officially opened up and pollen was beginning to fall everywhere. The slightest nudge of this plant would send pollen flying, and small piles of this were building up on every leaf of the plant. The tassel, however, did grow a little too high and it was beginning to impede on my grow light. I simply cut away the highest portions of the plant to give it a little more room to grow. In week 8, we had our first signs of the silks beginning to emerge from the stalk of this plant. This is where our ears of corn will eventually grow. Just 2 days after emerging, these silks had extended quite long. You can see a lot of pollen already beginning to stick to them. Because I'm growing indoors, I want to be extra sure that this plant will pollinate, and so I'm going to hand pollinate it. This is as simple as removing part of our tassel and rubbing it all over any silks that emerge lower on the plant. We rejoined this plant in week 10, and you can really see how stretched this plant is. Those lower leaves are very far below the light source and maybe not getting enough light each day, even though I have it in front of a window as well. We do have a cob of corn developing. It's still a bit small, only 3 to 4 inches long at this time. We're about 18 days past when the silks first emerged, and this is about when corn should be ready for harvest. We joined this plant for the last time in week number 11. You can see that this plant has grown quite tall. It struggles to stand up on its own and needs ties or supports to stand up straight. My leaves still don't look the best. Lines of green and lines of yellow, they never really became a full luscious green color, and I think we struggled with maybe some nutrient deficiencies as well as getting this plant enough light. We only had 1 ear of corn develop, which can be a sign of a stressed out plant, and our cob of corn is still quite small. At this point, we were 26 days past when the silks first emerged from the plant. Corn should be ready to harvest around 18 to 21 days after that point. I opted to harvest here even though my ear still looked quite small, but I didn't want any corn that was on this cob to go to waste. As we open things up, you can see that we did in fact grow a few kernels of corn, but the majority of this cob is shriveled up and inedible. This was definitely a fun plant to experiment with and grow. However, it was very difficult to find information on growing corn with hydroponics. I likely had nutrient deficiencies and didn't know how to properly deal with them. Compounding any nutrition issues was the difficulty I had getting light to all of the leaves of this plant. I think it's an easy bet that this plant would do better outside in the sunlight as opposed to indoors. I would love to hear in the comments what you thought of this grow and what I might have been able to do to grow myself more corn. The kernels that I did harvest tasted pretty good, and I'm excited to give this plant another try, most likely outdoors next summer. Thanks everyone for watching, and as always, happy harvesting!